The big meeting room was quiet except for the soft hum of machines. Beings from different worlds sat in their special chairs, each one made for their kind. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few looked like walking trees. They had been meeting, like this for hundreds of years to keep peace in the galaxy. Jake Morrison walked to the center of the room. He was a human, and he had been speaking for Earth for 5 years now. His hair was gray and his hands showed the marks of someone who had worked hard his whole life. The other beings respected him because he always tried to find peaceful ways to solve problems. Jake looked around the room at all the different faces watching him. Some had big eyes, others had no eyes at all. But they all listened when he spoke. "Friends," Jake said in his calm voice, "I know you are worried about humans moving into the Kepler area of space. The Zephyrian Empire says that space belongs to them. We want to work together to fix this problem without fighting." High up in the visitor seats, Captain Lisa Hayes sat very still. She wore a blue uniform with shiny buttons. Next to her, Commander Ryan Torres whispered into a small device. He was getting news from human colonies far away, news that the Council had not heard yet. The Zephyrian speaker stood up. He was tall and covered in gold scales that caught the light. His people looked like big lizards that walked on 2 legs. They were strong fighters and had a big empire. "Humans say they want peace," the Zephyrian said, his voice deep and rough. "But their ships fly through our space without asking. We want all human ships to leave our territory right now." Jake nodded, like he understood. "We can talk about moving our ships slowly so both our peoples are happy." The other council members seemed pleased. This was how things usually worked. Someone had a problem, they talked about it, and then they found a way to fix it without war. But Jake knew something the others did not know. Just a few hours ago, 3 big human ships had stopped talking to Earth. These ships carried families, children, and scientists. The last message from them said they saw weapons and were in danger. After that, nothing. Lisa Hayes felt sick too, her stomach. She kept thinking about her nephew Ben, who was only 19 years old. He worked at a research station in the Kepler area. She had not heard from him in 2 days. The council meeting took a break. Everyone got up to stretch and talk to each other. The Zephyrian delegate walked over to some of his friends from other worlds. He was laughing and seemed very happy. Commander Torres came down from the visitor area and walked quickly to Jake. His face was white as paper. "Sir," Ryan whispered, "I just got the final report. The colony ships, the research station, everything. They are all gone." Jake felt like someone had hit him in the chest. "How many people?" 37,000, sir. Men, women, children. The whole New Eden colony was destroyed. The scientists at the Kepler 7 station too. And the transport ships that were bringing supplies to them. Jake closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about all those people. Families who had left Earth to build new homes among the stars. Children who would never grow up. Scientists who just wanted to learn about the universe. When he opened his eyes, they looked different, harder. Lisa Hayes saw the change from across the room and felt scared. She had heard stories about Jake's brother, Admiral Morrison. People said when the Admiral got that same look, terrible things happened to his enemies. The break was over. Everyone came back to their seats. The Zephyrian delegate was still smiling, like he knew a secret that made him happy. Jake walked back to the center of the room, but he did not walk the same way as before. His shoulders were straight, and his steps were firm. People who knew humans well noticed the change. The diplomatic smile was gone from his face. "Friends," Jake said, but his voice was different now, cold. "I have received new information from the Kepler area." The Zephyrian delegate made a sound, like a laugh. "More human lies to make us look bad." Jake turned to look at the Zephyrian. For a long moment, the room was completely quiet. Even the machines seemed to stop humming. The Zephyrian's golden scale started to change color, getting darker. "Before we continue," Jake said very quietly, "I need to tell you all something important. For 5 years I have sat in this room. I have talked, made deals, and looked for peaceful ways to solve every problem. This is what you know as humanity's civil mode." Lisa Hayes stood up in the visitor area. Her hand moved to a red button on the wall. She knew what was coming. She had seen this before, and it had not ended well for anyone. "You have made a mistake," Jake continued, his voice getting quieter instead of louder. "You think that because we choose peace we are weak. You think that because we follow rules, we cannot break them. You think that because we are polite, we have no teeth." The room was so quiet that everyone could hear their own hearts beating. Some of the smaller species started to move toward the exits. "Let me tell you about human civil mode," Jake said, and for the first time in 5 years, he smiled. But it was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator that had been pretending to be prey. Commander Torres walked up to Captain Hayes during the meeting break. His hands were shaking as he held his communication device. The news he had was the worst kind of news a soldier could get. "Lisa," he said very quietly, "it is confirmed. New Eden Colony, the research station on Kepler 7 and all the transport ships, they are all destroyed. No one is alive." Lisa felt like the floor had disappeared under her feet. Her nephew Ben had been working at the research station. He was a good kid who loved looking at stars and dreaming about what was out there. Now he was gone, along with thousands of other people. "Are you sure?" she asked, but she could see in Ryan's eyes that he was sure. "The Zephyrians did not just attack our military," Ryan said. "They killed everyone, children, families, scientists. They burned everything from space so no one could survive." Lisa's hands made fists. She had been a soldier for 20 years. She had fought in battles and seen people die. But this was different. This was the murder of innocent people while their killers sat in the council chambers talking about territory. The break ended, and everyone returned to their seats. The Zephyrian delegate looked very happy. He talked to his friends and laughed, like someone had told him a good joke. He did not know that the humans now knew what his people had done. Jake Morrison walked back to the speaking area, but he was not the same man who had left 10 minutes ago. The way he stood was different. The way he moved was different. Lisa had seen this change once before in his brother, Admiral Morrison, during the Titan War. It had not ended well for the Admiral's enemies. "Honored friends," Jake began, but his voice was like ice water. "I have just received updated information from the disputed territories." The Zephyrian delegate waved his clawed hand like he was brushing away a fly. "More human propaganda to justify their illegal expansion into our space." Jake stopped talking and looked directly at the Zephyrian. The room became so quiet that people could hear their own breathing. Those who understood humans well felt a chill run down their backs. They had heard stories about what humans were, like when they stopped being polite. "Before we continue," Jake said in a voice that was barely above a whisper, "I need to make something very clear to this council. For 5 years, I have sat in this room. I have negotiated, compromised, and sought peaceful solutions to every dispute that came before us." He started walking slowly in front of the council members. Each step was careful and controlled. "This is what you call humanity's civil mode. You have become comfortable with it. You think this is what we are. You believe that our preference for peace means we are weak." Captain Hayes pressed the red button on the wall. Across human space, emergency signals began broadcasting. Ships that had been pretending to be harmless started showing their true nature. The merchant fleet revealed weapons that had been hidden in their cargo holds. Science ships displayed shield systems that were stronger than most military vessels. "Let me tell you what civil mode really means," Jake continued. "We created something called the Geneva Conventions on our homeworld. These are rules about how to fight wars. We made these rules not because we do not know how to be cruel, but because we know exactly how cruel we can be." The assembled beings started to shift uncomfortably in their seats. They had never heard a human talk like this before. "We made rules about not hurting prisoners because we learned what happened when we did hurt them. We made rules about not killing civilians because we know what happens when civilians die. We made rules about not poisoning water supplies because we have poisoned water supplies before." Jake stopped walking and faced the entire council. "Every human child learns about our history. We tell them about the wars where millions died. We tell them about the times when we killed each other over land, resources, and ideas. We tell them about the weapons we built that could destroy entire cities in seconds. Do you know why we tell them these stories? The Zephyrian delegate's scales had turned a much darker color. His species had instincts that told them when they were in danger, and those instincts were screaming now. We tell them these stories, so they will remember what we are capable of when civil mode is turned off, Jake said. On screens around the room, star charts began updating. Human ships that had been scattered across dozens of systems were moving. They moved together like they had practiced this many times before. What the galaxy thought was a peaceful exploration fleet was revealing itself as something much more dangerous. The Zephyrian delegate speaks of territorial disputes, Jake said, turning to face the golden-scaled being directly. But 37,000 humans did not die in a territorial dispute. They died in what you thought would be a consequence-free massacre. The delegate started to speak, but Jake held up his hand. The proof is already being sent to every council member's personal files right now. Sensor recordings, communication intercepts, visual evidence. Your battle fleet did not just attack our colonies. They destroyed them completely after confirming that civilians were living there. Around the room, council members were checking their data devices. The evidence was overwhelming. Images of destroyed cities, recorded communications of families, calling for help, and sensor data showing Zephyrian warships firing on defenseless settlements. Here is what you need to understand about humans, Jake said, his voice getting colder with each word. Civil mode is not our natural state. It is a choice we make every single day. It is a thin layer of civilization covering millions of years, of evolution that taught us one simple lesson: kill or be killed. Jake Morrison continued speaking, but his voice had become something that made the air in the room feel heavy and dangerous. The council members who had known humans for years had never heard one of them sound like this before. You want to know what human civil mode really is? Jake asked, looking around the room at all the different species. It is us choosing not to use the weapons we know how to make. It is us following rules we created to limit ourselves. It is us being polite when we could be something else entirely. Captain Hayes watched from above as more information flowed across her screen. Every human ship in the galaxy was now broadcasting its real identification. The peaceful research vessel Harmony was actually a heavy cruiser with enough firepower to level a small moon. The merchant ship Happy Trader was carrying weapons that most military fleets would envy. We do not use kinetic bombardment because it kills too many innocent people, Jake said, walking slowly in front of the council. We do not use biological weapons because they cannot tell the difference between soldiers and children. We do not use psychological warfare because it causes suffering that lasts for generations. He stopped and smiled, but it was not a kind smile. These are not limitations. These are choices, and choices can be changed. The Zephyrian delegate had gone completely still. His species had survived for millions of years by being very good at recognizing when they were in mortal danger. Every instinct he had was telling him to run, but his legs would not move. For decades, we have been operating under what we call restrictive rules of engagement, Jake continued. We have been fighting with one hand tied behind our backs because we thought it was the right thing to do. We have been playing by rules that our enemies do not even know exist. On the main screen of the council chamber, a star map appeared. It showed every human ship in the galaxy. There were thousands of them, and they were all moving with perfect coordination towards Zephyrian space. You see, we have been very careful to appear harmless, Jake said. Our merchant ships look like simple cargo vessels, but they carry enough weapons to fight off entire battle fleets. Our exploration ships seem like they are only interested in science, but they have been mapping every military installation, defense platform, and strategic resource in this part of the galaxy for years. The council members were starting to whisper to each other in their different languages. Some were afraid, others were amazed. A few were impressed despite themselves. Our civilian transports are not just civilian transports, Jake continued. They are troop carriers, supply ships, and mobile command centers. Every human colony has been built with defense in mind. Every space station can become a fortress. Every research facility has been studying more than just the stars. Commander Torres sent another message from his position. Every human civilian in the galaxy had just received the same message. Civil mode suspended. Prepare for defensive operations. Protect all human assets and personnel. Across human space, people who had been teachers, farmers, and shop owners were opening hidden lockers and pulling out military equipment. The galaxy had thought humans were peaceful because they had never seen them at war. But here is the thing about being human, Jake said, his voice cutting through the worried whispers in the chamber. We remember everything, every slight, every insult, every threat. We remember the friends who helped us and the enemies who hurt us, and we never ever forget when someone kills our children. The evidence files finished downloading to every council member's personal device. The images were terrible. Entire human settlements reduced to glass and ash. Recorded messages from families begging for help that never came. Children's voices cut short in the middle of crying for their parents. 37,000 people, Jake said quietly. Families who left Earth to build new homes among the stars. Scientists who wanted to study the universe and share their knowledge with everyone. Children who will never grow up to see what amazing things they might have done. He turned to face the Zephyrian delegate directly. They died while you sat in this chamber talking about territorial disputes. They died while your government pretended to want peaceful solutions. They died because you thought humans were too weak to do anything about it. The delegate tried to speak, but only a small croaking sound came out. You made one very big mistake, Jake said, stepping closer to the Zephyrian. You thought that because we choose to be civilized, we have forgotten how to be savage. You thought that because we follow laws, we cannot break them. You thought that because we smile and shake hands and make treaties, we do not remember what's you. We were before we learned to do those things. Every human ship in the galaxy had now changed its broadcasting signal. Instead of sending out peaceful merchant codes or exploration signals, they were broadcasting military identification numbers. The galaxy was seeing humanity's true strength for the first time. We are the species that turned our homeworlds, deserts into gardens, Jake said. We are the species that tamed lightning and split the atom. We are the species that looked at the vast emptiness of space and decided to fill it with our cities and our dreams. His voice grew softer, which somehow made it more frightening. But before we were any of those things, we were the species that killed everything that tried to kill us. We were the species that hunted the largest predators on our world for sport. We were the species that looked at war and turned it into an art form. The chamber was so quiet that the only sound was the humming of machines. The Zephyrian Empire has 48 hours, Jake announced to the stunned council. 48 hours to surrender completely and hand over every officer who was involved in murdering our people. After that, humanity's civil mode stays off until we decide that justice has been done. The Zephyrian Empire had existed for over 1,000 years. It controlled 17 star systems and had never lost a war. Its fleets were feared across the galaxy, and its soldiers were known for being fierce and cruel. The Empire had destroyed entire civilizations and enslaved whole species. It lasted 36 hours after Jake Morrison finished speaking. Captain Hayes stood in the command center of the human battle station Hidden Valley, watching screens that showed the destruction of the Zephyrian military. She had never seen anything like it in her 20 years. As a soldier, human ships appeared out of nowhere, moving faster than anything the Zephyrians had ever faced. The merchant vessel Happy Trader revealed itself as a battleship with weapons that could crack planets. The research ship Starfinder turned out to be a mobile weapons platform that could destroy entire fleets, but it was not just the ships that were different. It was how they fought. The Zephyrians expected human tactics to be simple and direct, like most species used. Instead, the humans fought like they had been planning this war for decades. Every move was calculated. Every attack hit exactly where it would do the most damage with the least cost. Status report, Hayes said to her communications officer. All major Zephyrian military bases have been neutralized, Lieutenant Jenny Adams reported. Their defense platforms are offline. Command and control centers have been captured or destroyed. Their fleet has been reduced by 87%. Casualties on our side? Minimal. Mostly equipment damage. No human deaths reported in the last 6 hours. Hayes shook her head in amazement. The humans were not just winning, They were winning without becoming the monsters they could be. Meanwhile, on the Zephyrian homeworld, Emperor Kraxthos the Terrible sat in his palace listening to reports from his generals. Each report was worse than the last. The humans have taken the Epsilon station, General Vortak reported, his scales pale with fear. They captured it without firing a shot. They somehow turned off all our systems and walked in through the front door. What about the Third Fleet? The Emperor asked. Gone, Your Majesty. The humans used some kind of weapon that shut down our engines. Then they boarded every ship and took our crews prisoner. No one was killed, but the entire fleet is now under human control. Emperor Kraxthos had built his reputation on being the most feared ruler in the galaxy. He had conquered worlds and enslaved billions. Now he sat in his throne room listening to reports of his mighty empire being dismantled like a child's toy. How is this possible? He roared. The humans are weak. They negotiate and compromise and follow rules. It appears we were wrong, Your Majesty, General Vortak said quietly. Back in the council chambers, the other species watched in stunned silence as updates flowed in from the war zone. The humans were not just defeating the Zephyrian Empire. They were doing it with a precision and efficiency that terrified everyone watching. Look at this, said Councillor Threx, a blue-skinned being from the Andromedan Federation. They are not killing civilians. They are not destroying cities. They are only targeting military assets. But how are they doing it so effectively? Asked another council member. Ambassador Jake Morrison, who had remained in the chamber throughout the conflict, answered without looking up from his datapad. We have been watching and learning for decades, he said calmly. Every time we visited a Zephyrian system, we were mapping their defenses. Every trade agreement gave us access to their technology. Every diplomatic meeting let us study their tactics and strategies. The assembled beings stared at him in shock. You mean this was all planned? Councillor Threx asked. Not planned, Jake corrected. Prepared for. There is a difference. We hoped we would never need to use this information. But hope is not a strategy. On the screens, they watched as human forces surrounded the Zephyrian capital world. But instead of attacking, they simply waited. We are not monsters, Jake continued. We could have destroyed every Zephyrian world in the first hour of this conflict. We have weapons that could turn their planets into lifeless rocks. But we choose not to. Use them. Then what do you want? The Zephyrian delegate asked in a small voice. Justice, Jake replied simply. Nothing more, nothing less. A communication signal came through to the chamber. It was from Emperor Kraxthos himself. I surrender, the Emperor said, his voice shaking. The Zephyrian Empire surrenders unconditionally. Please, no more destruction. We will give you anything you want. Jake nodded to Captain Hayes, who was watching from the observation area. She sent a signal to all human forces. Ceasefire. Secure all positions. Prepare for occupation duties. The war was over. The officers responsible for the massacre of human civilians will be handed over for trial, Jake announced to both the Council and the Zephyrian Emperor. Full reparations will be paid to the families of the victims. The Zephyrian military will be disbanded and rebuilt under human supervision. And if we refuse? The Emperor asked weakly. Jake looked directly into the communication screen. Then, we will turn off civil mode permanently, and you will discover what we are truly capable of when we stop holding back. The Emperor agreed to every demand within the hour. As the reports continued to come in, the council members began to understand something that chilled them to their bones. The humans had not been trying their hardest in this war. They had been restraining themselves even while completely destroying one of the galaxy's most powerful empires. The species that preferred peace had just proven they were the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy. 6 months later, Jake Morrison stood once again in the Galactic Council chambers. He looked the same as he had before the war. Gray hair, calm expression, diplomatic posture. But every being in the room now understood that his polite demeanor was a choice, not a weakness. The chamber had changed too. Where once there had been empty seats reserved for the Zephyrian delegation, now sat beings from a dozen different species that had been freed from Zephyrian rule. They looked at Jake Morrison with a mixture of gratitude and healthy fear. "Friends," Jake began, using the same calm voice he had always used. "I am here today to discuss the new arrangements for the Kepler sector and surrounding territories." Captain Hayes sat in the observation area, wearing a new uniform with more medals than she had possessed before the war. Next to her, Commander Torres monitored communications from across human space. The fleet positions that showed on his screen told a different story than they had 6 months ago. "The Kepler sector has been designated as a human protectorate," Jake announced matter-of-factly. "This means that any species wishing to travel through or conduct business in the area will need to file proper applications and submit to inspection protocols." He paused to let this information sink in. This is not a request. No one in the chamber objected. No one even asked questions. The former Zephyrian Empire was now split into 17 independent systems, each governed by their own people, but overseen by human administrators. The war criminals responsible for the massacre had been tried and sentenced. The Zephyrian military had been completely rebuilt with human training and human officers in command positions. Most importantly, not a single civilian had been harmed during the entire conquest. The humans had proven they could wage war with surgical precision, targeting only those who posed a threat while protecting the innocent. "I want to address some concerns that have been raised by various council members," Jake continued. "Some of you are worried about humanity's new position in galactic affairs. Some of you wonder if we will use our demonstrated capabilities to expand our territory or impose our will on other species." He looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many beings as possible. "Let me be very clear about something. Humanity did not want this war. We did not want to reveal our capabilities. We would have been perfectly happy to continue our peaceful exploration and trade relationships with all of you." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. "But when 37,000 of our people were murdered in cold blood, we had to make a choice. We could accept it and be seen as weak, inviting future attacks, or we could respond and show the galaxy that there are consequences for targeting human civilians." A small furry being from the Rigelian cluster raised a tentative hand. "Ambassador Morrison, many of us are concerned about what happened to the Zephyrian fleet. They simply stopped fighting. Their weapons stopped working. How did you do that?" Jake smiled, and for a moment it was his old diplomatic smile, warm and reassuring. "We have been studying galactic technology for decades. Every trade agreement, every joint research project, every diplomatic meeting taught us something new. We learned how your ships work, how your weapons function, how your communication systems operate." The implications of this statement rippled through the chamber. But more than that, we learned something about ourselves. We learned that our greatest strength is not our weapons or our technology. It is our ability to work together, to plan for the future, and to remember both our friends and our enemies. Captain Hayes received a communication from Earth. The President wanted to know if the Council was accepting the new reality. She sent back a simple message: "No resistance. Full compliance with all human requirements. I want to assure everyone in this chamber that humanity's civil mode has been restored." Jake continued. "We have no desire to conquer other worlds or impose human rule on unwilling populations. We want the same thing we have always wanted: peace, trade, and the opportunity to explore the galaxy alongside our neighbors." He paused for effect. "But now you all understand that peace is something we choose to give, not something that can be taken from us. Cooperation is something we prefer, not something we require for our survival." A tall, crystalline being from the Centauri Republic spoke up. "What assurance do we have that humanity will not use these capabilities against species who simply disagree with human policies?" Jake considered the question carefully. "The same assurance you have always had. Our word, our history, and our demonstrated behavior. The only thing that has changed is that you now know the cost of breaking faith with humanity." The council session continued for several more hours, but the tone had fundamentally shifted. Where once human requests had been debated, and sometimes denied, now they were accepted immediately. Trade agreements that had been stalled for years were suddenly approved. Territorial disputes that had seemed intractable were resolved in humanity's favor without argument. But Jake Morrison was careful to be fair in his dealings. He did not press for unreasonable advantages or impossible concessions. He asked for what humanity needed and deserved, nothing more. As the session ended and the various delegates prepared to leave, several approached Jake privately. "Ambassador," said the Andromedan counselor, "my government wants to establish closer ties with humanity, perhaps joint military exercises." "We would be happy to discuss that," Jake replied politely. Others made similar offers. Trade partnerships, research agreements, mutual defense treaties. Everyone wanted to be on humanity's good side now that they understood what being on the bad side meant. Captain Hayes joined Jake as he prepared to leave the chamber. "How do you feel about all this?" she asked. Jake was quiet for a moment, looking out at the stars visible through the chamber's great windows. "Sad," he said finally. "Sad that it took 37,000 deaths to teach the galaxy something. We could have explained with words. Sad that people had to die for others to learn respect. But proud?" Hayes asked. "Yes," Jake admitted. "Proud that when we had to act, we acted with honor. Proud that we showed restraint even in our anger. Proud that we proved humans can be both civilized and dangerous." As they walked toward their shuttle, Jake made one final observation. "Civil mode is back on, Lisa. But now everyone knows it is a gift we choose to give, not a weakness they can exploit." The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Humans preferred peace, but they were very, very good at war, and sometimes that knowledge was enough to keep the peace all by itself.